either one of these any good?
Wow, this is a good movie.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, well, the director from yesterday doesn't think so.
It stinks.
You sorry? You waste our film.
It's so bad. Oh boy, everybody's talking about the big movie this week, and we will too. But there's a lot more to chew on. Some smaller movies and good stuff. We'll get to them all. Welcome to it. This is the Screening Room Podcast, and she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And we're from madwolf.com, and we're going to start off where else? With Arthur Fleck, institutionalized at Arkham, awaiting trial for his crimes as Joker. While struggling with his dual identity, Arthur not only stumbles upon true love, but also finds the music that's always been inside him. It's Joker, Folie à Deux.
Tell us, what's changed, Arthur?
I'll tell you what's changed. I'm not alone anymore. That's what we should be talking about.
I want to see the real you.
And as we found out, we didn't take French in high school, but we found out
or
that
psychology.
the title translates to basically a delusion between two people.
Yep.
Right? And that's a lot of what's going on here, but there's a lot going on here. The sequel to Joker from a few years back, and Todd Phillips is back as director and as co-writer. And man, a lot of people are surprised that it's a musical, number one. I thought it was pretty well known, but, you know, we're in our bubble sometimes.
Yep.
So that's an interesting choice. Another big swing, I think. We talked about big swings last week with Francis Ford Coppola and Megalopolis. So I do respect that, trying to do something new. But there's so much fascinating just about this movie even existing, because you hear a lot of stories about, and I think even Todd Phillips said at the time after the first Joker came out, there wasn't going to be any more. But then, depending on what you read, they leaned on him a bunch of money. And then what he does with this character, I think is fascinating, because in a lot of ways it undercuts a lot of what happened in the first movie. And there's a lot of uneven here. I didn't hate it. I understand how some reaction to this, some of the early reaction I see, some of the people just absolutely hate it. I didn't hate it. Some of it works, but a lot of it does not.
I think for me, the biggest problem with the movie is that you never leave prison or the courtroom, and it's very hard not to feel you feel that confinement. It makes the film a bit tedious.
Yeah.
And although it does have a lot of good scenes, good moments, good performances, I just kept thinking, I'm still watching this movie. It feels long. Joaquin Phoenix is great. He doesn't have as many opportunities to be great as he did in the first one, because he doesn't talk very much. He's kind of a shell of his former self. Mm-hmm. And then he meets Lee Quinzel, who's in the minimum security wing, and then his spirit rekindles. But even so, that guy is quite different than either of the two personalities that we've gotten to know so far.
Yeah.
And I just think it's all the way around just less interesting. She's great.
Yeah, she really, and as far as the character goes, they make a big deal early on. One of the main prison guard, played by Brendan Gleeson.
Glorious as always. He's great.
Makes a point of saying, he's got no more jokes for us anymore. He's not a funny man anymore. Yeah, he's really beaten down and withdrawn and smokes a lot. This movie is a big smoker. I'll tell you what, there's so much smoking going on in this movie. But so then Brendan Gleeson gets him into this singing class, and that's where he meets Lee, played by Lady Gaga, and she is great. They are great together. Yeah. I think when those two characters and those two actors are together here, it's electric.
Yeah.
It really is. You're drawn to them. And of course, she can sing.
Yeah.
We know that. I think some of these scenes she's downplaying her vocal
for
prowess.
Sure. Oh, yeah, there's no question.
She can blow him away. But he does singing too, and a lot of the fantasy musical numbers, dip into the the American Songbook. I mean, you've got a bunch of classics. That's Life, and I've got The World on a String. That's Entertainment. You've got a couple more recent tunes. They do the Bee Gees' To Love Somebody. You've got the Close to You. Burt Bacharach, the Carpenters thing.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of it is the American Songbook and these classic sort of song and dance numbers that they do in these fantasy sequences. But you're right, so much of it becomes a courtroom drama, and those are tough anyway.
They are
to make interesting. And her character Lee shows up because she gets out of prison, and then she becomes sort of a cheerleader, a rallying point for the masses to get behind Joker.
Yeah.
And during this courtroom, the strategy of his defense ends up frustrating her, and she's visibly bored by it. And that's about the time I started thinking, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It gets frustrating because there are moments that work, like you said, some great visual set pieces. The entire movie is so dark and weary and just
dreary.
And that's another reason why some of the musical numbers pop.
Yeah.
Because look at this color and splash and just a sort of glamour. It's such an interesting choice to throw that into this film and this character, but we don't want to spoil anything as always, but where he takes the character, I thought after a while he seemed to be commenting more on critics of the first film and as to what he did with the character, which I found very interesting.
Well, I feel like, the first film got a lot of flack, probably rightly so, because of the way that it treats mental illness. And so I think that Todd Phillips, maybe attempted to address that here. A lot of times when a filmmaker does that, they will double down. They flip the bird and he didn't seem to do that. He seemed to be like, yes, I was perhaps a bit flippant about mental illness, which I appreciate, but I don't think he knew how to resolve it very well. I mean, there is something interesting in the approach, in all of the sort of decisions he made in the approach, but the execution is just not there. The first film was Todd Phillips making a Martin Scorsese supervillain movie. That's what he did. He took the idea of the violently alienated white man, which is a staple of a lot of course, Scorsese's films, and he turned it into the Joker. And for a lot of people, that worked. It certainly fit the mold well.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's as comfortable with the musical. I like the idea, and especially the idea of a musical in terms of sort of a shared fantasy. That makes sense to me as well. I just don't think the execution was on target.
Which is another reason, because of the shared fantasy, that's another reason I thought using pretty well-known songs was appropriate instead of, say, like writing new songs.
Yeah.
Because in a fantasy, you're going to lean on songs that you already know. It seemed organic as much as a fantasy sequence could be. I wasn't really bothered by that, but yeah, it's to me the most fascinating thing is where he decided to take the character and really undercut for people, especially that really liked the first one and what the character represented. It's going to be interesting how they might respond to this. But it's another big swing, and like we've said before, I do appreciate that, but it's another one that is very frustrating at times because you can see, you know what, this might have worked. This weird combination of musical and this anti-hero kind of comic book guy. But it just comes out. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes. It feels it.
It does.
It does. It feels it. Especially the courtroom stuff drags on and on. But we got to mention a couple of other cast members. Steve Coogan pops up as a sort of a tabloid type of journalist. You see Zazie Beetz is back as Sophie in a small part, and also Lee Gill, who plays Gary Puddles.
Who was that was far and away the best scene from the first movie for me, for my money.
What a heartbreaking scene.
Oh my! It was just beautiful and brilliant, and he was so good and he is so good in this. It is the highlight of this film, I think.
It's so emotional, and he does a great job with limited screen time. But yeah, if you saw the first one, and I hope you did, if you're going, I think you don't have to, I guess, but you would really miss the context, I think, if you haven't seen the first one. And then if you did, you will remember his scene there trying to reach the doorknob. Just ripped your heart out.
Did.
And he's very emotional in this as well. So a great performance there. And all around, it's a good ensemble. At the end, you're like, there was so much electricity there, and it seems like it was wasted.
Yeah.
But another fascinating swing. There are things to like, but in the end, I think it left me more frustrated than anything else. And that is the musical version. It's Joker Folie à Deux in theaters now. Let's go to Max next. An author returns to his hometown of Jerusalem's Lot in search of inspiration for his next book, only to discover that the townspeople are being attacked by a bloodthirsty vampire. It is Salem's Lot.
This is not a disease you can catch.
Let me in.
If we don't fight back, they'll come for us eventually.
Things have gone bad in the lot now.
Run! It's not safe!
Sundown, you better take care. If I find you've been creeping round my back step.
This is writer and director Gary Dauberman taking on the Stephen King classic that a lot of people have great love for from the miniseries in the 70s.
As well as 2004. I mean, I think
they did do it
I think
again,
the 04 version is hit or miss in the way that the 70s version is not, but...
Yeah, this one is just a standalone film, and I think for me, well, first off, I have less love for the original miniseries than a lot of people do. I know there's a lot of nostalgia there. I get it. It has at least one iconic horror moment. This seemed really rushed to me as a standalone film with a runtime of just under 2 hours. The story seemed rushed.
Yes, I do think that that's probably the biggest drawback, for this film, which we've been waiting for a long time. It got made, it got shelved, it's been sitting, and we thought it was not ever going to get released, but now it's gotten released to Max. You have to have Max to watch it. And I'm a big fan of the original Tobe Hooper. I'm a big Tobe Hooper fan, as you know, and I liked his original. I liked his vision of the vampire, which is very reminiscent of Nosferatu, the original Nosferatu. I love that look for a vampire. I liked a lot about this. My biggest... as you say, my biggest criticism is just that everything felt very rushed. I think Dauberman made some interesting choices. There's one very iconic moment that I think you can't go without, that everybody recalls as terrifying them as children. But there's more than one, and I think that he sidesteps many of them. I think, aside from the sort of feeling rushed, the other big criticism is how he handles the third act. Most people that I've seen really don't like the way he handled the third act. I liked it. Maybe because the way that Stephen King did it and the way that the two miniseries did it, that's all too familiar at this point, not just from Salem's Lot, but because so many vampire movies end in a very similar way. This seemed like a fun and interesting way to me to end the film. I liked it. I liked that. I liked the movie. I didn't love it. I didn't have super high expectations. I didn't really care for the 2004 version. So, I thought the cast was great. Bill Camp, always great.
Love to see Bill Camp. I do think Pilu Asbeck, who we love, mainly in foreign language films, he seemed kind of wasted to me.
I agree with you.
He can be just great.
Yeah, and it's in the James Mason role.
Yeah.
And I remember when I saw him first and realized that he was Stricker, thinking to myself, oh, I can't wait for him to James Mason it up.
Yeah.
Because Mason chewed scenery as only he could. And I thought, oh, Pilu can do that. But he doesn't get as much of an opportunity,
really
which
doesn't.
is too bad. I would have liked to see him tear into this a little more.
Agreed. But yeah, Bill Camp, love seeing him. Spencer Treat Clark, who we always like.
Yeah.
I remember him from Unbreakable. And the leads are Louis Pullman and Mackenzie Lee at the top. And then also Alfre Woodard.
Always great to see her.
Always great, too.
Yeah.
She pops up, too. So you'll definitely recognize some people in the cast. But if you have, it's one of those, I think is an easy choice. I mean,
Yeah, if
it's
you have
October.
Max,
It's
yeah.
Max. Fire it up.
Exactly.
But if you're a fan of the original, I think the biggest thing, well, the ending.
Yeah.
Because that's a big change.
That's a big
I do
change.
respect them for trying something new.
Yeah, I do
do.
too. I do too.
Well, you have to keep, like you said, you have to keep that one moment.
Yes.
You definitely do.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think the biggest complaint is it just seems too rushed.
Does.
Taking something that's always been 2 parts.
Because the book is so big.
Right. I get that. But condensing it down to just under 2 hours. But Salem's Lot now, the new one, is on Max. Next up, in theaters, a historical drama. Struggling to fit in at his new school after being expelled for his treatment of Augie Pullman, Julian is visited by his grandmother and is transformed by the story of her attempts to escape Nazi-occupied France during World War II. It's called White Bird.
Tell me about this new school of yours.
Right now, I'm just trying to fit in. It's kind of been my motto ever since I left my old school.
Julia, you did not leave your old school. You were expelled for being cruel to another boy. I'm sure your father has told you stories about when I was a young girl.
He says you don't really like to talk about it.
I don't. But now, I think, for your sake, I must. You forget many things in life, but you never forget kindness. Because when kindness can cost you your life, it becomes like a miracle.
Yeah, and if the name in that synopsis, Augie Pullman, sounds familiar, it's because that's the character played by Jacob Tremblay in Wonder.
That's
and this
right.
is a follow-up to that. It's by the source novels by the same author. And it follows the character and the actor, Julian, who bullied Augie in the movie Wonder. And yeah, the same actor, Bryce Gizar, plays him here as he is older, of course, and he's been expelled. He's trying to fit in at his new school, and he gets a visit from his grandmother, played by the great Helen Mirren, and he talks about coming to his new school, and she says, no, you didn't come here. You were expelled for being cruel and a bully to another child with, if you remember from Wonder, he had facial deformities. And so that is why Grandma wants to tell him her story, which he has not really heard much about. He says that his father has told him that Grandma doesn't like to talk about it. And she says she doesn't, but she feels he needs to hear it. And she goes back to flashbacks of her story as a young girl, a young Jewish girl in Nazi-occupied France. And as the threat to Jews starts getting more dire, a fellow classmate who has a bum leg, they call him a cripple, and who's also bullied, befriends her, and both he and his family hide her out as the Nazis are hunting down all the Jews in the area. And that is the historical narrative that takes place through these flashbacks. And it's pretty well done. I mean, the two young actors that play the girl, young Helen Mirren, Sarah, Ariella Glazer is her name, and then her friend, Julian, played by Orlando Schwartz, are both very, very good. And then Sarah's mother, and then Julian's mother is played by Gillian Anderson. So you'll obviously recognize her. Yeah. And so the bulk of it is this flashback story. And the two books, more of a young adult fare. And this one definitely has the feeling of a young adult type of movie. Although it has more weight to it, obviously, for the subject matter. It's directed by Mark Forster, veteran director, Monsters Ball,
Finding Neverland,
bunch of films. And so it's given that treatment but by the same time, maybe for a little little older viewers, they can take a little bit more cruelty because, obviously what we're dealing with here is the Holocaust. And for that kind of treatment, I think it's pretty effective. Adult viewers are going to see some predictability, are going to see some things simplified. But when you take it down to the context of how the source novel treated it, I think it's well done, and I think it's well worth seeing, especially for kids, teens, to have a window into this and get a good message that's not, it's not for them, really heavy-handed in just that kindness, like Helen Mirren's character says, kindness can be a miracle, especially when, in her case, the people that were being kind to her were risking their lives to do it. And of course, with our current climate in the world, being kind is never a bad message to get across.
No.
So I think in that way, it's really well handled. It's a little bit simplified, like I said, in spots, but keeping in mind that it's got young adult beginnings. It's one that is better than a lot. And if you think back to Wonder, it was a fine film.
It was.
Fine.
It was very nice.
Yes,
yeah.
very nice family film. This one again has some ugliness to it,
Sure.
but it sort of
absolutely.
has to.
Yes, it does.
For this sort of story being told, and it's great to see Helen Mirren. Her screen time is limited, obviously, because she's just telling the story. And once she starts telling it, then we get it. We see it. But it's always great to see her, and she handles it very, very well. She brings that. That gravitas that makes it very natural for her grandson to be hanging on her every word because we are.
Right.
And so I think it's it's rated PG-13, and if you have some teens in your household that really might be interested in this, I think it's definitely worth your time. And that's in theaters now, and it is called White Bird. The next one is in select theaters and on VOD, sci-fi horror thriller. In order to escape police after a robbery, two estranged siblings lay low in a farmhouse that hides them away in a different time. Then they reckon with a mysterious force that pushes their familiar bonds to unnatural breaking points. It's called Things Will Be Different.
Joe, we gotta go.
This is it.
What's the other one?
1932. Spin clockwise, set to noon, then run out.
Okay.
Come on.
This is the first feature from writer-director Michael Felker, but he has been the editor for most of the features made by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead.
Yeah, and if you've seen any of their films, you just watch this trailer and you would think, as I did, is that a Benson and Moorhead movie?
Yeah, exactly. Because it plays with all the same themes. And if you haven't seen a Benson and Moorhead movie, by all means, go watch them because all of them are great. And this one, this movie is really interesting. It's very simplified time travel film, really. And one of the things, it's sort of a very lo-fi time travel film because, what the brother has heard from a source that they don't disclose, although pay attention to what that source looks like, they can go to this house, they can do a little, back and forth on the grandfather clock, sort of knock on a door, and then that house takes them to a different time, sort of a time out of time. And they're just going to hide in this time out of time, spend some, they haven't been together for a long while. You're not entirely sure why. Things are sort of unveiled as you go along. But he's looking forward to spending 2 weeks with his sister, who he hasn't gotten to see for a long time.
Yeah, and so the promise of the title is, we'll do this and then things will be different.
Yep.
Because we go back in time and just correct this little thing.
Yeah, it winds up being a bit of a time loop. And, as always happens, of course, they think we'll just hide out for 2 weeks. When 2 weeks is up, we'll go back to our lives.
Yeah.
Nobody will be looking for us anymore. Well, no, time travel is never that simple. And one of the things I think works the best about this movie is that the whole thing is sort of a metaphor for the cycles of family problems. And how you just keep repeating the same thing, no matter how many opportunities you get not to repeat the same problems. And I think that's done pretty light-handed, but it's done really well. The actual time travel sort of conundrums are handled really well. I love that it doesn't. Nothing about it seems futuristic. I love that as well. It's got this weird retro quality to it that I thought was very fun.
Well, that's also like Benson and Moorhead.
Exactly.
Films,
yeah.
Some of them dealing with time travel.
Yeah. But mainly it's the performances. So by Riley Dandy plays the sister Sid, and her brother Joe is played by Adam David Thompson. And the two of them are primarily all that you see on screen. It's just the two of them together, and they do a great job with this sort of lived-in relationship that's kind of fractured but full of longing and also bitterness. It's just a very well-made film.
And that is called Things Will Be Different in select theaters now, but also available on VOD. Next up is the latest from the filmmaker who did Psycho Gorman, a movie that we loved. This is another comedy fantasy. Workaholic yuppie Connor is in an existential rut until one night he catches a bizarre ad for a party hotline hosted by a strange dancing goblin named Frankie Frico. Could this be just the recipe to spice up his boring life? We'll find out. It's Frankie Frico.
If all goes well, I should be back Sunday evening.
I don't even want to tell you what I got planned for the weekend.
Oh, 8:30.
That is late even for a Friday.
Are you ready for the party of a lifetime? It's time to call Frankie Frico's Fun Time phone. Call now.
This is Frankie.
Are you ready?
Ready for what?
To party, my man!
I'm ready! I'm ready to party!
Here we go!
Writer-director Steven Kostanski tends to work with the same people, and I'm glad of it. You know, in this movie, you know, the way Psycho Gorman, and if you haven't seen it, please do.
Oh, please see Psycho Gorman. PG for short.
PG for short. Psycho Gorman was this very weird, sort of mind-bent, live-action Saturday morning TV show kind of a vibe, and it worked so well. And this Frankie Frico has sort of a late 80s VHS deep sequel sort of a vibe to it. Like if you, not the Gremlins films, and not Critters, but maybe Critters 3, Critters Goes to College. You know what I mean? Like it's a send-up, but a very loving send-up of those sort of 80s puppety, gremlin-y, disgusting little, is it a comedy, is it not, kind of films, like a Critters film. And he, this nerdy guy, when his wife leaves town for a few days, he calls a 1-900 number. But it's Frankie Frico, who is like, we'll help you party down. And they drink a whole bunch of caffeinated pop, and they eat a whole bunch of pizza. And the next thing you know, the house is a mess, and somebody has spray painted the word butt on the wall. And what's he going to do? His wife will be home at any minute. It's one of those sort of a movies. It gets a little off track there. They wind up off planet, actually, for a while. It's all nutty. It doesn't always work. It often works, but exclusively if you have some sort of fondness and nostalgia for those kind of movies of the late 80s, and not everybody's going to. So I would say I enjoyed it. It's fun. It's not even a fraction of as great as Psycho Gorman was, but what is, really? I feel like if you watch the trailer and think, oh, this is for me, no doubt it is for you.
No doubt. It reminds me of when Psycho Gorman, before we saw it, you thought I was going to hate it.
I did.
And I loved it. I loved it so much, Psycho Gorman. But this is Frankie Frico, out now in theaters. Let's go to Hulu next for a horror thriller drama. In 1930s Oklahoma, amid the region's horrific dust storms, a woman is convinced that a sinister presence is threatening her family. This is called Hold Your Breath.
Mama, were you outside all night?
My advice, say keep the house sealed best you can. Relax. You're taking your sleeping aid?
Any word on that drifter? What if it happens again?
These girls are lucky to have you. You don't think that?
He could be anywhere!
Was he in me?
Mom? If you breathe him in,
Girls, get inside!
he'll make you do terrible things.
We're very well. You?
The great Sarah Paulson is the reason to watch this movie. She is Margaret. Her tidy house, her tidy dresses, her tidy children, they're all sort of trapped in the middle of just acres and acres and miles of nothing but dry dirt during the Dust Bowl time period. Her husband has gone out with a crew to build bridges because their farm is not an active farm at the moment, and she's decided to stay with the girls, their two daughters at home. And so it's one of those movies, and you see these sometimes, Westerns that focus on a female character. It's a descent into madness because of things like societal pressure, the inability, like powerlessness. And then this one, about half the way through, they introduce a new character, and she starts to believe that it is a sinister presence, that it's actually something like a sinister presence that you can breathe in with the dust. And so it all kind of comes together. Not always that well, to be honest with you, in terms of the actual sort of metaphor of breathing in this dust. But the performances are great. And there are 2 or 3 really chilling images throughout this film.
This is the feature debut for writer and co-director Carrie Krause. And yes, Sarah Paulson, always fantastic. But like you mentioned, there are some good performances throughout the cast, including Ebon Moss Backrack. It's a name that you may not know, but you'll know his face.
He's in The Bear. I think he just won a bunch of Emmys for The Bear.
There you go. We don't watch The Bear, but a lot of people
yeah,
do. So
a lot of people
that guy.
do.
He was the tow truck driver that thought he was dating Jennifer
Yeah,
Lawrence
yeah.
in No Hard Feelings.
Yes.
So it's that guy.
It's that guy. He's great in this. And so is Sarah Paulson. And so is Amaya Miller, who plays Paulson's oldest daughter, Rose. It's a really solid cast. It's just that the storytelling itself makes some strange decisions and then winds up making too many not strange enough, very typical decisions. But there are some great moments in this movie, and I definitely think, especially if you have Hulu, it's worth watching.
Yeah, and that's called Hold Your Breath on Hulu now. Next up is the latest in Shudder's VHS series. 6 blood-curdling tapes unleash horror in a sci-fi-inspired hellscape, pushing the boundaries of fear and suspense. This is VHS Beyond.
Everything that we thought we knew is called into question. Maybe we're not alone. Maybe our company does not wish us well.
Biggest discovery in human history.
These tapes have to be considered the Holy Grail.
I know we all want to put an end to this. Tonight we get our chance.
Just keep filming.
This is the 7th outright VHS film. And if you are not familiar with those, they're anthology films every single one, all 7 films and all of the shorts in each film are found footage style. This one has a theme, and they have in the last few years had themes, 1994 and 1986. So the theme for this one, though, beyond what it is aliens, alien encounters, except, weirdly enough, for one of the shorts, which is about a really weird doggy daycare. And it was co-written and co-directed by Justin Long and his brother Christian. Justin Long, the actor, and his brother Christian Long. I'm not sure why they decided to include it in this, since it is the only one that has nothing to do with aliens. But it's a creepy one and kind of funny, and I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed most of these shorts. 2 of them have, I thought, really interesting looking aliens. The first one, which is called Stork. I loved that. I loved the look of that alien. And then another one called Live and Let Dive. It has a pretty cool looking alien. Most of them, I think, are really very clever and fun. Of course, they're each one very short. So I feel like this really worked. I mean, I know I keep going back to this weird doggy daycare thing that just doesn't fit at all, but I mean, I enjoyed the shorts. So,
yeah,
and if you have Shudder,
and they're based around found footage, which, you know, the integrity of that device isn't always airtight, but it seldom is. Really,
no, it seldom is. That's true. So you have to just let that go a little bit, which is hard for me sometimes. But
yeah, exactly.
As you know, as this series goes, I think it's fine. I think it's a fun one.
Yeah, VHS Beyond is the latest on Shudder now. Let's go to Netflix next for the sequel to the most popular Spanish film ever on Netflix. It's a thrilling physical journey that allows an approach to the darkness where it is scary to look. It appeals to the viewer's civil responsibility and forces them to face the limits of their own solidarity. I didn't write this. This is The Platform 2.
Y de eso no hay fuga posible.
We enjoyed The Platform, but to be completely fair, the reason that it is the most watched Spanish film ever on Netflix is because it dropped during lockdown.
Yes.
And so everybody watched it. But I was excited about that at the time because it's a very heady, smart, foreign language horror film, and you don't usually get a big audience like that. So I think that was great that so many people watched it, and we really enjoyed the first one.
Yes, fascinating idea and a great use of metaphor. Co-writer and director Galder Gatzuela Utiera. And I butchered that, but he's back for The Platform 2. And this one, it's not as effective as the first one, but it's close. First of all, it's not new.
Right.
And so that's,
right.
The Platform was such a novel approach to it that you're used to it now. The trick is how are they going to change it up? Well, they change it up because there are new rules and lots of new rules and a bigger metaphor that is a lot more explained this time around. There's been some sort of revolution in the Platform, and so now the rules have changed that when you come in, part of your interview is you pick a menu item, let's say pizza, and then when the Platform comes down, that's all you can eat. If someone else has broken the rules above you and eaten your pizza, you still can't eat anybody else's. Then yours is gone. You have to stick to the rules. And that's an interesting twist on things. There's also been stories among the population of someone all the way down at the bottom level, 333 I think it is, who survived somehow not eating and is now called the Messiah. So that's where that's this sort of terrain this movie tackles. Metaphor for basically religious fanaticism and the sects that build up inside this prison and the different levels of the Platform, who they choose to follow, what rules they choose to follow, and how harshly they are going to inflict punishment on those who don't follow those rules. And that's what happens here. And just like the first one, it's brutal. There is some brutal punishment, no doubt about that. But it's very talky. We get a lot of rules explained to us via the new inmates, which is organic, I guess, but it's so much more talky than the first one.
Oh, yes, very much more.
And so the metaphor is a lot easier to pick up. I think it's well-intentioned and an understandable place to take this movie. If you're going to think about the first one, well, where are they going to go? Where are they going to go next? This seems like a logical way to do it.
Right.
Take the metaphor to religious fanaticism and following rules and, believing in a certain leader and believing that this cause is holy, even when you're inflicting cruelty and torture and death. So that resonates. It does. And the performances are strong. The visuals are still strong. It's still a very compelling idea when you see that platform either come down or come up. Who or what may be on it this time? What happens if you're in the way when it's coming down or coming up? So there's some fascinating visuals here and some ideas. It's just everything is a little less than the first time. I know that's common in sequels. Not enough to skip it. I think it's definitely worthwhile. It's just everything is a little more force-fed, a lot more talky, but it's worth checking out, especially if you've seen the first one. And if you haven't, I would recommend seeing the first one.
Oh yeah, it's a great movie.
This.
You should watch it.
Yeah, check it out. But this new one, The Platform 2, is on Netflix now. Let's stay with streaming. This one on Prime. A fantasy horror drama portrays the macabre descent into hell of a man facing the consequences of a regrettable decision. It's called The Wait.
No voy a irme. Yo no tengo culpa. En mayor o menor medida, todos somos culpables.
Christy Ra reviewed this one for us at madwolf.com, and it looks great. It's a great period piece, a Spanish horror film, but it kind of takes too long to get where it's going, and she felt like in the end it was maybe a little bit disappointing.
This is writer and director F. Javier Gutierrez. Yeah, you can check out her full review at madwolf.com. Disappointed by this one. It's called The Wait on Prime Now. And one more on VOD this week, a comedy trapped in a mysterious void outside the bounds of time and space. A struggling stand-up comedian must investigate how his body wound up motionless on his bathroom floor and wake himself up before it's too late. It's called Me, Myself, and the Void.
My roommate was vaguely threatening.
You think I don't know what you two are up to?
Friend of mine for years. She's a comic.
I mean, what? Am I supposed to be scared? Is she like, do I need to hide?
Could you? What's going on right now?
I think if you give up here, then that's it.
Yeah, that's why she's coming over here for weed in California on Valentine's Day.
I think you're on borrowed time.
Did you hear that?
What's going on?
I gotta get to the bathroom.
The bathroom?
It's where he passed out. Yeah.
Rachel Willis reviewed this one for us at madwolf.com. I was mainly excited that Kelly Marie Tran is in this movie, and I have not seen her in anything in a minute.
I know.
So I was excited about that. But the main actors, Jack DeSena and Chris Smith, are also a duo from a YouTube channel, apparently very popular.
You may know them from there. We did not.
Nope,
but
we did
you
not.
may.
And I think Rachel's main problem with the movie is that the film assumes you do know who they are, but that makes a lot of the film. If you don't know them, it just feels like a vanity project. It doesn't really hold together particularly well. And every time they sort of latch on to a concept that might seem like a good movie idea, they sort of abandon it. So it winds up just feeling like a bit of a mess.
Yeah, she thought it was a bit of a mess. The co-writer and director is Tim Hotkiet. Again, probably butchered that. And that is called Me, Myself, and the Void. It's on VOD now, and Rachel's review is at madwolf.com.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Lobby time means it's Schlocketeer time, a.k.a. Daniel Baldwin, or the other way around. I guess it's a.k.a. the Schlocketeer. Whatever we call you, we get the latest studio news. What's going on?
All right. Well, the following films are all now available on VOD. That would be Marvel's Deadpool and Wolverine, Kevin Smith's The 4:30 Movie, James Watkins' Speak No Evil, and the serial killer thriller Strange Darling.
Ooh, okay.
Strange Darling. A lot of people miss that one. You should check it out.
I will be checking it out this weekend.
All right.
Tim Burton's Beetlejuice will arrive on VOD next week on October 8th. And Alexander Aja's Never Let Go will hit VOD on October 11th.
Cool.
Ghost Game, which is the latest movie from stylist filmmaker Jill Gevargizian. I probably butchered that. But it's getting a limited theatrical release on October 18th ahead of a VOD release on October 22nd. And then Despicable Me 4 will hit Peacock on October 31st, just in time for the kids to watch after they load up on sugar from trick-or-treating. And Warner Brothers has set a limited theatrical release on November 1st for Clint Eastwood's Juror Number 2. It's getting a staggered wide release as we get deeper into awards season. And it's expected to be his filmmaking swan song.
Yeah, but I know he's, 94 or something? But he's been saying that for a while.
Yeah, we'll see if it holds true or not, but it does look pretty good. And then there's a Liam Neeson crime thriller called Absolution, hitting theaters on November 1st. And Shudder will premiere Doc of Chucky on November 1st, which is an in-depth documentary on the Child's Play franchise from the people who previously did the documentaries Never Sleep Again and Crystal Lake Memories. So hopefully that'll be a good one.
Yeah, yeah.
Catch Up Entertainment has set a November 8th theatrical release for their action flick Weekend in Taipei, which stars Luke Evans and Sung Kang. And then Vertical Entertainment is releasing the creature feature Elevation in select theaters on November 8th. That one stars Anthony Mackie and Marina Bassarin. A24 has moved up the theatrical release of Scott Beck and Brian Wood's new horror film Heretic by 1 week to November 8th.
Cannot wait.
Oh, yeah, that's the one with Hugh Grant, right? Yeah.
Yep. And then Netflix has set a November 13th premiere for its critically acclaimed drama, Amelia Perez. I know that one's going to be coming in hard and fast on award season this year. And then also on the awards front, A24 will release Luca Guadagnino's Daniel Craig starring drama Queer in theaters on November 27th.
Right.
Yeah, Luca.
And that's all I've got for you this week.
All right. We appreciate it as always. You can catch up with Daniel on the socials at The Schlocketeer. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Looking ahead to next week, we get Saturday Night in the theaters.
Also, Terrifier 3.
Lonely Planet.
Dolly.
Falling Stars.
Daddy's Head.
Good Girl Jane.
And Slasher.
Okay, that's all next week. But this week, ooh boy, the Joker. Filet-O-Do, what do you think? We love to talk about that or any of the films, and there's a bunch of them to talk about this week. You can easily find us, Mad Wolf Columbus, on the socials. Also, madwolf.com is the main website. Keep in touch. And until next week, a reminder, since it is October, maybe you're trying to fill the month up with as many horror films as you can. If that's true, we salute you. And please don't forget about Obstacle Corps, our movie.
That's right. It's an excellent horror comedy, kind of a mashup of Caddyshack and Battle Royale, if that sounds good to you.
Sounds good to me.
Does. We're on Tubi, Prime, Plex, all kinds of things.
Yeah, so check it out. Let us know what you think. And until next week, be well, enjoy the movies, enjoy Obstacle Corps. And she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And this is the Screening Room Podcast.
See ya.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Bye.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.